and I just want to tell Yoku that he can be really proud of the team that organized this conference. It's really a wonderful conference. Everything runs smoothly. The food is fantastic. It's really been an enjoyable experience, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Elmarie and her team for a wonderful conference. Okay, let's start. As you can see, that's my title. I want to start off with a disclaimer. First of all, I do not represent the NRF. They have given me some statistics, but I'm not here representing them. I'm not representing my hosts, nor am I representing the University of Stellenbosch. I'm simply trying to tell you about my experience of the NRF system, both as a panelist and as an applicant myself. So it's certainly not the official NRF review. I unfortunately cannot change the system. I think it's a good system. It's not without its flaws. I often butt heads with the NRF because I think the system can be improved, but they have made some improvements over the years, but I think it can still be improved. So, yeah, as I said, I simply offer my views based on my own experience as both an applicant and a member of the so-called specialist panel from time to time. I'm not sure how long I will go, but hopefully there will be at least 20 odd minutes for questions at the end. Okay, the first thing we must understand is that the whole NRF application system is divided into panels. So there's a medical panel and a history panel and a theology panel, and ours, where most management scientists will apply for a rating, is called the Economics Management Administration and Accounting Panel, EMA. So that is basically the first step in an application process, is make sure your application goes to the right panel. There are some of us probably sitting here who may have an option of more than one panel. If you're in industrial psychology, there's a psychology panel, and there is the EMA panel. So you will have to think carefully about, in that case, which one is the best for your application. Okay, normally the so-called expert panel will consist of 4 people, 4 senior academics, each representing economics, management, administration, and accounting. So that will be the expert panel. Now, we'll talk about the role that this panel plays in the whole process a little bit later on. Just a few statistics. Where do these applications come from? And you can see it's not only universities. There are others who also apply. Some of them are retired, some are self-employed, some work at museums or national facilities like the Human Sciences Research Council, government departments. But as you can see from that slide there, the majority of applicants are from universities. My slides are not really, if I look, I sometimes feel embarrassed, and I have been criticized by Professor Jordan on occasions about my slides. They're not really professional, and I apologize. Just an idea on the size of the different panels. There you can see the psychology panel, for instance. There's ours, and you can see, I think it's the biggest panel that receives it's the panel with the most, that processes and receives the most applications. You can also see the growth figures there. So increase on previous years. This is a comparison per university, and I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. Although I am from Stellenbosch, I'm not going to try and say that we're the best or have the most. But I knew this was going to happen. You can see that the University of Cape Town has, as a percentage, they have 412 rated researchers expressed as a percentage of those who could be rated, has the highest rating, 38%. Then Stellenbosch, Pretoria has more. Pretoria has more, but as a percentage, we're slightly above them. But anyway, those are the percentages of rated scientists, number of rated scientists as a percentage of those who could be rated. In our own panel, this is now not the whole system, this is in our own panel. Stellenbosch had 14 in 2009, increased to 20, Pretoria 20 as well, Cape Town University 18, and it seems as if University of Witwatersrand has increased substantially over the last few years, well, the last 3 at least. Yeah, there we are. I can't remember what the purpose of this slide was. Anyway, maybe you find it interesting. Okay, here is some statistics on the successful ratings per category. And as most of you probably know, there's an A category, an A category, a P category, B, C, Y, and L. I think L has been discontinued. It's not used anymore. I also want to draw your attention to the so-called RU. And RU is rating unsuccessful. So you can see that about 10, I think they have a percentage there somewhere, 10% of the applications in 2013 were unsuccessful, 13 the years before, 12, 10, and so on. So there's at least on average 10% of applications that do not succeed. There you can see the new applications, 43% this year out of the 100. 57 were resubmissions, in other words, those who were rated previously and reapplied for a rating. They expire after 6 years. 6 years, I think, yep. Okay, sometimes applications are withdrawn. Okay, so one of the responsibilities of the expert panel is to review the applications in the sort of first round and then advise the NRF that this application is premature. Okay, so it's too early, it probably won't succeed, and the panel will then ask the university to withdraw the application. Sometimes they refuse and insist on letting it go, but those withdrawals are ones where the university withdrew the application. Okay, it's often said that the cohort of experienced researchers are on the old side. If you look at those percentages for 2012, you can see that's not really true. At least a third of them are in the 40 to 49 age category. So it's not really true that it's dominated by old males over 60 years. And if it was like that earlier, it's not the case anymore. Okay, I hope I'm going to debunk some myths about the system, because unfortunately it's true, there's no question that there are many myths about the system. And the first one is that the process is corrupt. And I can assure you today that it's not true. That system is not corrupt at all. There are just too many people involved in, and role players involved in that process, that one single person can dominate or even influence the outcome. And when we describe the process just now, you'll see why. So my answer to that accusation is it's impossible, simply because there are so many different role players involved in the process. One single person cannot dominate a decision. The next one is that the NRF rates you. That's not true. The NRF is only a facilitator. It's a peer review system, and I've got it on my slide several times. It's a peer review system. The NRF does not rate you. The NRF doesn't even really prescribe to the reviewers what they want a applicant to look like. So there's no prescribed guidelines of I'll evaluate this applicant using the following guidelines. Okay, I'll come back to that. Nor does the so-called specialist committees, or sometimes called the panel, nor are they rating you. It's your peers who are rating you. It's not the panel. The panel interprets the peer reviews that they received from your peers, and based on that recommends a rating. But it's not the panel. It's not the NRF. Yeah, that's it's one that I recently heard. The NRF is not transparent on what is expected. That's true, but that's the nature of a peer review system. They do not have prescriptions. They don't say you need to have at least 10 publications or at least 5 published in international journals or anything like that. So there is no transparency because the peer review system doesn't demand transparency on what is required. The system is based on peer review, and therefore the NRF cannot give you any guidelines, nor can I. I've been involved in the system since its inception, and I cannot give you a firm guideline that I can say to you, this application will succeed. I cannot, because there are no guidelines. It depends on what your peers are going to say about your output. It's a numbers game? No, it's not a numbers game. From experience, I can say that for a C application, you're going to have more or less 10, 12 publications. But even that, I've seen applications with 15 publications not getting an RU. And I've seen some with 6 papers on that gets a rating. And what's the difference? Not numbers, but what the peers said about your research. So what the system really means is you can have a short CV with highly important and with a high impact research and get a rating. And others who does run-of-the-mill stuff that makes no impact, that nobody reads, not published in decent journals, and it can happen to you that you don't get a rating. There are no benefits. That was an early criticism of the system. It's also not true. C, B, and A-rated researchers gets funding from the NRF directly. There's also a special fund reserved for rated researchers. The call is out at this very moment. And they are often institutional, like Stellenbosch University. If you're a rated researcher, they make funds available to you that are not available to others. So there certainly are benefits. Another one that I recently heard is it's who you know. That's not really true. And it's for the same reason why it's not corrupt. If you mean it's who you know, in terms of having some sort of network that people of academics who can rate your research, yes, then it is who you know. But it's not the cynical, it's who you know, and if you know the right people, you'll get a rated. It's not true. Okay, but we can ask you, if you disagree with me on any one of those, we can discuss them later on. Okay, so what is it? What it is? It's a peer review system. So I want to repeat that. It's a peer review system. It's not anything else. So it's a peer review system of your recent, it covers the last 8 years, research track record. It's your recent, past 8 years research track record based on the quality and the impact of your research outputs from the perspective of your peers. And that is where a lot of these myths come from, is that people do not understand that it is a peer review system. So why should I participate in this system? Well, in my view, that's my personal view, it's a benchmark for yourself, where you are, what the peers think of your research, for your department, for your university. Universities like to, on those glossy magazines, tell how many rated researchers they have, and rightfully so. You can track your own professional development and progress. The funding, I've already talked about. And in my view, and I've seen it in my own university, universities will increasingly insist on ratings for promotion to senior levels. I don't know what it's like at your university, at Stellenbosch. It's highly unlikely that you will become a full professor without an NRF rating. Even for an associate professor, the question is asked about the applicant. So what is regarded as research? That's the official view. The creation of and development of intellectual output, the invention and generation of new ideas and knowledge. So what is not regarded as research? And that is a major point that I want to make today, is the application process, and that's one of my criticisms of the system. The form that you have to fill in asks a lot of information that is never used. That form asks a lot of information that is never used. So don't pad your application with things like that. Nobody listens. Nobody reads it, nobody's interested. So don't put in don't try and that's one point I will make later on one of my slides. Don't try to fool anyone by pretending that what in fact was a consulting report now is one of your research outputs. That you really compromise your own credibility if you try to do that. Don't do that. And don't even refer to anything that was in reality a consulting report. No study materials. It's not considered as research. No teaching materials. Textbooks, they ask you about textbooks and that form, but it's not used. The reviewers look at your research output, not at your textbooks. You can put it in there if you want to, but it's not considered for rating purposes. Policy documents, we sometimes get applications of people who work for the government or local government, produce policy documents, and then they sneak it in there and think that that'll help them. Keynote speaker assignments, not considered. So don't waste your own time. Don't compromise your credibility by trying to put them in there and pretend that they are research outputs. Okay, the time frames. I don't know how familiar you are with the whole system. A rating is valid for 6 years. So yeah, these are some hypothetical dates. In the 5th year, once you are rated, in the 5th year, the NRF will send you a letter and ask you to reapply for a rating. The period of under review is the past 8 years. In the beginning, they didn't ask you to submit copies of your papers. These days they do. I think they ask you your best 6 or 8 outputs. But the reviewers are asked to cover the whole, an 8-year period of research. Now these are sort of administrative details. The NRF closing date is normally on the 15th of February. You may have in-house dates as well. So your own university will say, if you want to apply by 15 February, we need to have it at our university, normally the 10th of December. And then they will then first review it. They sometimes offer advice and say, we recommend that you don't apply now, or they are also asked what they think their rating should be. Should it be in a Y or a C or an A or whatever the case may be. Okay, I made the point about, okay, then the results are available September to February. There's a round going now at the moment, so those who applied in February 2013 should hear by very soon. Okay, sometimes applications are delayed. Okay, sometimes the panel doesn't get enough reviews in for an applicant, and then they will ask for more reviews. And in that case, you will not hear by September. You will then probably hear by early next year. Okay, so those are the role plays. We are the applicants. Okay, so I will have I'll share some tips to you with you just now, but make sure that application is done correctly. Okay, then the designated authorities, those are basically your university's research office. They will review it at first, so they play a role. Then the NRF staff, monitoring and evaluation unit, I think they call themselves. They are basically just administrators. They send the invitations out, they appoint the panel. The panel will appoint the reviewers, but they handle all those administrative details. Then the reviewers, okay, local and international. NRF has a huge database of reviewers that have participated in the system previously. You're not expected to use them necessarily, but they are available. As some of you may know, you nominate 6 reviewers. You nominate 6 reviewers. The expert panel will then take 3 of those, will select 3 of those who they think are capable of doing it and who are independent, and then the expert panel will add 3 of their own that were not nominated by the applicant. Okay, so those panels are very vigilant. They look at those that you nominate. They are, how can I say, skeptical, cautious when appointing your PhD supervisor. those that you wrote a book with. Not that it's not that it's illegal or not allowed, but if you get a glowing report from your co-author in your textbook, you know it is regarded with a degree of skepticism. So I'm not going to say don't do it, but be careful. And so it does sometimes happen that a reviewer's report is ignored for that reason. Sometimes you get very vicious reviews as well. And you can see there's a personal problem here. So the judgment wasn't done based on the academic work. There's some other issue, and those reports are also ignored. Okay, just about the local international. If you have ambitions to get a higher level rating, like a C2 or a C1, the requirement is that there should be some evidence of international exposure. In other words, international journals. So in that case, if you aspire for anything higher than C3, make sure you also include international reviewers on your list. Okay, and I'll talk about networks just now. If you don't have a network, if you don't go overseas, you don't go into international journals, you don't interact with academics overseas, it's very hard to nominate them because they don't know you. So networks are very, 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 very important in this whole system. Okay, and now I come to the point where this myth that the system is corrupt or can be dominated by anyone is proven wrong. What really happens is, on the day where those ratings are decided upon, there will be piles and piles of reviewers' reports. So we will take Professor Jones, and Professor Jones, and you have your 6 reports there, and we will say, okay, this guy says, remember, the panel interprets the reviewer's report. So we will look at Professor X reports. Okay, according to this reviewer, Professor Jones is a C2. Take the next report. Okay, this report, if we read what he says here, it's probably a C3. Then the next one. So we'll have a number of scores on a spreadsheet. C2, C1, C1, 2, CCC. Okay, and then we say, okay, if we look at all these together, we think, the panel, think this is a C2. Professor Jones is a C2. Okay, then after we've gone through all the applications, an assessor comes in and a chairperson who independently looked at each one of those reports. And she will say, I think Professor Jones is a C2. I agree with you. And the chairperson, who also independently looks at each one of those applications, will say, I think this is a C3. Okay, so now we have 3 people who debate and say, well, and then they'll say to you, why do you say this is a C2? Well, it's because Professor B said this and this. His research is so impactful, and all my students read it, and it's never been done before, and it's in the best journals in the world. And okay, and then eventually there's a compromise between the panel, the specialist panel or the committee, the assessor, and the chairperson. So you can see who all is involved in this process. 6 reviewers, 4 panel members, an assessor, and a chairperson. There is no way in the world that any one single person can influence that decision. Okay, now sometimes it happens that there's no compromise. So for instance, the panel will say, okay, the assessor and the chairperson both think this is a C2. We thought it was a C3, but we'll compromise on a C2. That's fine. Okay, then it's a C2. If there is no compromise, sometimes the specialist panel will dig in their heels and say, no, we don't accept this as a C2. We think it's a C3. Then it goes to an appeals committee. So someone else, another independent person or committee that looks at the application. Yeah, and those high-level committees, for instance, the EEC, if the 3 entities, the specialist committee, the assessor, and the chairperson think this is an A, then it's not accepted. It goes to the EEC for final approval. So to get to an A is seriously tough. I know there's not one A sitting here in front of me. Why? Because there is only one. It's a professor in economics, in our panel, professor in economics, who's an A. So there's only one A-rated researchers on the management panel, basically. Okay, Maybe you'll have questions about this later on. Okay, so remember, the specialist committee or the panel is they're not the reviewers. The committee, the specialist committee or the panel interprets the reports of the reviewers. Yep. Okay, so SC is the specialist committee. They only make sure it's the right panel initially, and then make sure that we cull out the premature applications. Okay, there's a slide from the NRF, which basically describes the whole process, as I've just now discussed. So it's the submissions, the specialist committee, some are withdrawn, then we try to get the 6 peers reviews, interpretation of the reviewers' reports, in comes the assessor to join the chairman and the specialist committee, and those 3 entities basically try to find a compromise on the rating. Okay, so as most of us sitting here will be C-rated researchers, they are by far the most common category. Just what does it require? And this is the only guideline that the NRF formulates in terms of rating. So they try to distinguish between A, B, and C in the first place, and then what is a C1, C2, C3. So what is someone in the C category? A sustained recent record of productivity in a field which basically implies focus and depth. So they look at quality work, coherence. Coherence is important in the NRF system. There must at least be some commonality or golden thread in your research. They don't like this all over the place. And it's not that they only dislike it, it's very hard to get reviewers if you have so many disparate themes in your research to get someone to comment on your research. Demonstrate the ability to conceptualize problems and apply research methods to investigate them. Evidence of research independence and leadership. Okay, so they look at, are you the first author, the senior author? Self-initiated research, and the quality of the journals. Okay, so it sometimes happens that an applicant's entire CV consists of work with students. Now that's not good. That's not good. That doesn't demonstrate that you can do independent research. So you have to do at least a degree of self-initiated research. Otherwise, you're not a leader in the field. Okay, top journals, as high as possible. And I'll come back to that just now. If you look at the specifications, I'll show you on my next slide. C3 does not require any international recognition, but C2 and C1 does. So if you want to go to C, if you aspire for C2 or C3 or even higher, obviously, you have to have a few international journals on your CV, and certainly international reviewers. Okay, so there are the criteria. I've just discussed them, but just to make it, just to see the distinction between C1, C2, and C3. And it's sometimes difficult. There's no question. It's sometimes difficult to distinguish between them. But you can see there the word international is in there. It's C2 and in C1. Nothing there. Okay, so what C3 really means is that most of the reviewers, most of those 6, must concur that you are an established researcher. Okay. Now, see, there the words all and all come in. And firmly convinced, firmly convinced. Some reviewers indicating that she enjoys considerable international recognition. Some international recognition. Yep.
Can I ask a question on this?
Yeah.
So, for instance, you don't have like 15 publications. So
Yep.
for instance, you have 6 or 7.
Yep.
But most of them are in internationally recognized journals.
Yes.
Would that be taken into consideration for C3?
Absolutely, yes. Yep. If your reviewers think so, yep, definitely. Okay, then the B and the A ratings. Researchers, B ratings, researchers who enjoy considerable international recognition by their peers for the high quality and impact of their recent research outputs. Is Sandra Perks here? Okay. I sat in with her. One of the unfortunate limitations of the system is that if you work on topics that are very specific to South Africa, or to emerging markets maybe even, or South Africa, you sometimes have a problem with international appeal. Why? Because international reviewers say, oh, what the heck. Now, the person that I just asked about, she works on street hawkers. And I don't want I really have no intention of to embarrass her. But if you send a paper or a series of work on street hawkers to an American academic, he's going to say, yes, Lucky, what is this now? This is irrelevant stuff. From their perspective, street hawkers may not be. Now, street hawkers may not be a good example, but if you work in areas that are very specific to South Africa, you may run into problems in terms of international recognition. That's just the point. I'm just, yeah. Some economists, they get very sour about this because they say they work with South African data and South African interest rates and whatever. And then the international reviewers are sort of aloof almost about their work. And they counter-argue and say, well, if we don't work on South African data, who must? And which is a fair point. But I don't have an answer for that problem, I'm afraid. Okay, then researchers who are unequivocally recognized by their peers as leading international scholars in the field for the high quality and impact of recent research outputs. And as I said, there's only one in South Africa that I'm aware of. Now, the reason why A ratings are more common in the natural sciences than with us is most natural science work on a very small, specialized field. I know they say one of the people from Pretoria who is often a chairperson in our panel, he works on horseflies. He's a horsefly expert, and he's 8-rated. But he's the only guy who works on horseflies in the world. So all his peers say, yeah, if you want to work on horseflies, that's the professor you must cite. And that is unfortunate. In our field, you're always going to find someone who works on the same area as you. So for you to become a genuine expert that is basically the only expert in the world almost, highly unlikely. And that's why they are so scarce. Okay, the Y rating. Y rating is, in my... it's a bit controversial. What is a Y rating? 40 years and younger. Many of you sit here maybe in that line. 40 years or younger, and a doctorate obtained no more than 5 years ago. Okay, they are regarded by the NRF as the stars of the future. Now, so in their perception, the Ys are the ones who are going to be the Bs in 5 years' time at least. Now, why say, okay, and then there's a Y1 and a Y2. There's often this debate. We have young researchers who are younger than 40 and fewer than 5 years since they got their PhD. Should we make them a Y1 or a B2? Now, I know Pretoria, this is regarded as better than a B2. Y2, and I think they give them additional funding as well. Now, in that case, I would say Y1. But a Y2, if you can qualify for a C2, I personally would rather take a C2 than a Y2. A Y2 is a sort of in the middle of nowhere. But universities have different perceptions. And while there may be some staff here from the research offices of this university, they often convince applicants to go for the Y rating. And I don't really know why. And then they write on the application form, it's there in writing on the application form, the university recommends a Y rating. And if you are in line for a Y rating, think carefully about that. Because if you don't make Y1 and you are properly recognized and funded by your university, in my view, don't do it. But there are others that disagree with me. Okay, now some tips. I've got 5 minutes to finish. Don't apply prematurely. Okay, don't do it. Wait till you are ready and that you have enough publications with enough impact that enough academics know about you. So be careful I know there's a lot of pressure, but think carefully about it. In my view, don't apply prematurely. Make sure your CV is updated on the NRF system. I know it's a long and tedious process. they're not going to process your application unless it is. So do it. And by the way, you can cut and copy, you can paste and copy from a Word document into the system. So it's not really that bad as people make it out to be. Choose your reviewers carefully, the importance of networks. I mean, I often see applications of people who I never see at SAIMS, never. Now, how do you build up a network if you don't come to the national conferences? Nobody knows you. So networking, even over a glass of red wine, is great. That's the way you build up networks. People must know about you. They must listen to your presentations. They must read your work. If you don't, a peer review system is it's not going to work for you. If no one knows you, read your work, do not read your journals you're publishing, you will struggle, no question. But it's the impact of your work, your question, it's the impact of your work that is more important than the volume. As I said earlier on, a degree of coherence is recommended. Do self-initiated research. Do not only rely on your postgraduate students. Don't spend too much time on the other stuff, and that's the books, and even the conferences, even the international conferences, hardly looked at. It's the published journals that are the most important. International conferences second, local conferences second. But don't spend time. They ask you on that, what is your research plans? What are you going to do? I've never read any one of those. Nobody's interested. The reviewers don't look at that. They look at your research output. So fill in the form, write a paragraph, but don't write 3 paragraphs. It's really a waste of time. And you can tell the NRF I said that. Participate in the process as reviewer when you're asked to do so. That's how you will start learning the process. So if you get an email, please, you were asked to rate, please do it if you're interested yourself. That's the way to do it. Bibliometrics, the so-called H-index, that is when the specialist committee gets your bibliometrics, your Scopus, Web of Science. They don't use Hartsig's Publish or Perish, but they use the other 2. So every applicant gets, the specialist committee gets a piece of paper with every applicant's H-index on those 2. But it's often not used. Why? Because the NRF says no. Although they give it to you, they say don't use it. Why? Because they want you to look at the peer review. It must be a peer review system. Otherwise, they argue that then becomes a bit of a numbers game. But go online. You can do it. They differ, unfortunately, so you will get different scores on each one of those 3. But it will give you an indication of your impact, because that's what it do. The H-index is an impact factor. It's a quantification of the impact of your research. So, yeah. By the way, that's one of the things where I disagree with the NRF. I think your bibliometrics should play a role. What not to do, don't tell them, you sometimes read these reports where someone will tell you about their problems. Their personal problems, that they were divorced and that there's problems in the department, and you won't believe. They're not interested in your excuses. I had someone in my office the other day in my own faculty telling me that he doesn't have laboratory assistants like the guys in the sciences, and so please don't tell them that you were on sabbatical or that you were in an administrative position or in a managerial position. Just don't do it. Nobody is interested, really. Don't try to pull the wool over the reviewer's eyes. Okay, I've said that already. Padding applications with low journals. We all get these. That's my last point on this slide. Avoid those low quality, low impact journals. We all get these emails almost daily. Open access, quick publishing, double blind review. Just pay the money and pay quickly. Don't publish there. If you're interested in NRF, don't publish there. And in my view, don't put it on the application. Because the expert panels they all know the journals. And it's just not going to work. Okay, I think I've talked about the others. Also, you get these glowing self-reports of, I'm on South Africa's who's who list. I'm such a great supervisor. I won these rewards. I do so much for the disadvantaged students. Don't do it. You're wasting your time. Okay, and finally, it will not go away. The NRF system will not go away, I can assure you. If you're from the University of Pretoria, make sure you love it. Why? Because Cheryl De La Rey, your principal, initiated the system in the managed system. She's the mother of the system. So you are going to love it if you are from the University of Pretoria, whether you like it or not. And then lastly, remember it's a voluntary system. Nobody is obliged to do it. It's voluntary. If you don't like it, don't do it. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you to my hosts. Elmarie, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.